Hello from the National Weather Service. Here's a quick look at water flows and flood potential update for the Blaine and Lincoln County areas in central Idaho. Right now in our reservoir system, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation is currently at a capacity of 64%. We look at the effects in the Blaine and Lincoln County area. You can see Littlewood reservoirs at 32% full, and we'll show you some flows that are coming in and out of the Littlewood here shortly. You can always get our information at weather.gov/Pocatello with links not only to National Weather Service items, but also to the Natural Resources Conservation snow information, as well as the Bureau of Reclamation. To get our information, you're going to go over here to Rivers and Lakes, and you'll get a view of what we call the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service. And you can click on any one of these different river gauges as we go along. The river gauges are operated by the U.S. Geological Survey. This is the one at Haley, captured today on March 24th. You can see right now we're starting to get a little bit of diurnal cycle. Every once in a while you'll see a little blip going on, but for the most part, general flows coming down at the Haley right now at about 3.28 feet. We look at how much snow is available in the upper valley above the river gauge. You can see that right now the expected volume of flow to come down is about 531 acre-feet of water. An acre-foot of water is, if you were to measure an acre, a square, and put a foot of water on it, how much of that is up in the mountains right now that needs to flow through this particular river gauge. One of our bigger years that we've had recently was back in 2006, and you can see the total amount of volume that came down in that particular year. And you can notice right now our forecast is nearly 100 acre-feet above where that value was back in 2006. Another thing to look at is peak flow. This is when the highest value passes a particular river gauge. When we look at the river gauge there at Haley, you can see that our historic flows, our biggest one was in 2006, where we had almost 8,000 cubic feet per second, about 8 feet came down in that particular river gauge. The previous big year was back in 1983, where 61,000 or 6,100 cubic feet per second came down. The current forecast right now, this is a probability forecast on the left-hand side. 95 percentile means it's going to happen, guaranteed to do. 50 percentile is usually what we forecast for, and you can see this particular value that we're expecting at least to get to about 5,600 cubic feet per second. And then for planning purposes, you want to consider these values down here in the 10 and 30 percentile. And you can see right now for the floods of back in 2006, we're in those values right there. So for planning purposes, you need to start thinking about how fast is that snow going to come off. We know there's a lot up there. We saw the volume a moment ago, but is it going to come off slowly or is it going to come off fast? If it comes off fast, this peak value may rise in the concern. A little bit of history for you. This is the different peaks that have occurred and the highest values at that particular river gauge. You can see here's the number one back in 2006, where we had just under 8,000 cubic feet. 1983 was 61, and here's a few other years. So remember the 1997 year was a big snow year, but its peak is down here in 5th place. Let's transition over to the Littlewood Basin. You can see that in the Littlewood, they do have a reservoir there that's run by the Bureau of Reclamation. In anticipation of the snowpack, on the graph here, you can see that the Bureau of Rec started letting water out as early as January to prepare for this heavy snowpack. And then as we've started to melt some of that mid-level snow, you can see that the water is starting to fill back up a portion of the Littlewood Reservoir. Currently right now it's at 32% capacity. Water's coming in are about 900 cubic feet per second, and water's going out of the dam right now are a little more than that. They're trying to at least keep the volume at or below where it's currently in the reservoir. Looking at their historic values, their peak year and the amount of water that needed to come off, the volume forecast of acre feet was back in 1983. The current projected forecast puts that particular river gauge in 2nd place at 186 acre feet, thousands of acre feet. You can see 2006 year, we're actually running above that particular year. Here's a look at the river gauge that's above the reservoir. You can see that a really good look at those diurnal cycles going on. When you have the daytime warming, the water starts to run off overnight. it starts to slow down and back up and down. So you can see a consistent trend that we are kind of raising, and now we're starting to level out a little bit. So we'll see how the next week or two plays out, and the amount of rain that falls, and also what our temperatures are going to do to impact the water levels that are going to be coming into the reservoir. Downstream from the dam, this is the Littlewood River near Cary, the river gauge there. And again, you can see those daily cycles. And right now, the forecast is basically keeping it below action stage forecasting-wise, but they are coming close to that as we get into next week, depending on how the weather plays out. Historic flows on the Littlewood. This is values of water that's come out. In 2006 and 2011, the values didn't even make the current chart. This is the current forecast right now. And the flood stage at this particular gauge is at 1,660 cubic feet per second. And that falls right in this range here, about 70 percentile. So there's probably a really good chance that we're going to be close to that flood stage when we hit the peak. And right now, the current forecast is somewhere between the middle of April and it could exceed and go all the way into May, depending on how fast that snowpack comes off. You can see the historic level of 2680, that occurred in 1952, and the last big year was in 2005 with 2100 cubic feet per second. Now let's go a little bit to the west to go to the Magic Reservoir. Right now the Magic is 69% full with about 135,000 acre feet. When it is full, it holds about 195,000. Right now we do have some significant flows coming in off the Camas Prairie, and then also the lower elevations below Haley are significantly influencing the amount of water that's coming into the Magic Reservoir. In fact, when you combine both the two river gauges, we're about 6,200 cubic feet per second inflow. Right now the irrigation district's releasing just under 2,000. So they are allowing the reservoir to fill at this point. To show you the inflows, this is in the Camas Prairie. You can see that over the last week or so, significant rises as we've started to melt off the snow at the low levels there in the Camas. And we shift gears over to the Bigwood River at Stanton Crossing. You can see that they've had that same sort of, not as quite as dramatic rise, but they are rising a little bit at over 800 or 8.54 feet. When you combine both of those again, their combined flow into Magic is about 6,200 cubic feet per second. And this is a nice little graph that illustrates that right now the current flow in that actually exceeds what happened in 1983 and 2006. And here's the value that happened back in 1952. So it looks like back then they melted off pretty quick to cause the values to be that high. But right now we're really doing pretty good melting into the Magic. We look at the river gauge below the Magic Dam. You can see right now that's the value that the irrigation district has set, flow rise, and as we start to fill up that reservoir, they'll probably start doing some more releases into both the irrigation system and then also potentially just into the main stem of the Bigwood River below that. This is some historic values at the river gauge near Richfield below the dam. You can see the value in 2006. We reached about 6,100 cubic feet per second on May 21st of that particular year. So with the amount of water that's up above, there is a good chance that we will see values around the 2006 level, or we may exceed that depending on how fast the water comes off. As we drop downriver and we combine both the Littlewood and the Bigwood rivers, that particular river gauge, once that happens, called the Malad River, just below Gooding. And you can see in 2006 we did have flooding occurring in the flats down there, and you can see that's historic value. We still had some much higher years, including 1997 overall, but we did have some flooding that occurred in the area in 2006. So when we look at all those potentials, the amount of snow that's up in the mountains and our current flows and what's melting, this is the overall central and eastern Idaho flood potential. And you can see both the Bigwood and Littlewood are currently at high risk for concern. And depending on how much snow we continue to build over the next 2 or 3 weeks as we have storms potentially coming in, we may be changing this to exceptional risk value, especially on the Bigwood before it's said and done. But we'll keep that and keep you informed as that goes along. So here's the forecast for the next 6 to 10 days, next couple of weeks. We are expecting near normal temperatures for our start of the end of April and start of or end of March, start of April. But we stay in this wet trend, and in fact, you can see that there's at least a 33% likelihood that we'll be wetter than normal for this time of year. As we go for the first full week of April, current temperature trends remain just the same as what we typically have for this time of year, but that wet trend continues for us. So for the next 2 weeks, this wet pattern that we're in has a good likelihood of continuing. Overall, when we look at the 3-month forecast for April, May, and June, our spring time frame looks like typical temperatures are anticipated. And as we go into the latter part of spring and the start of summer, you can see that we start to warm up a little bit. By the time we get to the end of summer, we're anticipating a likelihood of being above normal temperatures overall. What about the trends for precipitation? So for the spring time frame, you can see we're right on the edge of being above normal for April, May, and June. That continues on to May, June, and July. But here's the interesting one. As we finish up the months, the summer months, you can see that there is a potential to be wetter than normal. And that continues even into the start of fall time frame. So that may play a big influence in overall the amount of water that's going to flow in the Big Wood and Little Wood basins. So our summary, we do have a historic snowpack available, lots of water to run off. In fact, the Big Wood is ranked first right now, Little Wood ranked second. The Magic Dam is exceeding flows of 1983 and 2006 coming into the dam at this point. So that could be an interesting blend of how the irrigation district manages the amount of water in there. And when we look at projected peak flows, there's at least a 10 to 30% chance that we will exceed the all-time historic flow that occurred back in 2006 at the Big Wood gauge in Haley. So forecasting-wise and preparation, you need to be prepared for potential significant flooding possible along the Big Wood, Little Wood, and even the Malad River basins starting by mid-April and then continuing in the months of May and June, especially if conditions remain the same or we continue in a wet pattern. If you do have questions, you can always call our forecast staff 24 hours a day. They're available at 208-233-0834, and again, they're available to assist you. Appreciate you taking the time to listen into this little video, and we'll give you further updates as we get into this flood season. Take care.